Hi everyone. Welcome back to Woo Can Cook. My name is Wesley, and this is a show where we are slowly cooking our way through all of the food from my childhood. Today we're diving back into our series dedicated to Hawaiian comfort food classics with an homage to a dish that sadly no longer exists, which is the Mapo Moco found at Papa'aina on the Lahaina wharfs of Maui. Although sadly Papa'aina was lost to the Maui fires in 2023, its culinary legacy created by chef Lee Anne Wong still lives on in my camera roll, as I was fortunate enough to grab a bite to eat in their space before the fire took it from us. Before we dive in, I'll start by mentioning that the Papa'aina folks have an ongoing GoFundMe campaign to support the staff in recovering in the wake of the fires, which I will include in the description of this video. For those unfamiliar, a Mapo Moco is the mashing together of two dishes that we have made on this channel already. One is a classic Hawaiian dish and the other is a classic Sichuan dish. Mapo tofu is a spicy braised ground pork and tofu dish commonly found in Chinese Sichuan cuisine that most notably makes use of chili oil, doubanjiang, and Sichuan peppercorn to create its fiery red, saucy qualities. Its relatively simple composition makes it somewhat of a comfort food classic made by Chinese moms all over, since many Chinese Americans, myself included, likely grew up eating their own parents' version of this dish too. Similarly, the loco moco is also a classic Hawaiian dish that features a hamburger patty served on top of a bed of rice, then stacked with a runny egg on top and covered in gravy. Some folks in the comments of this channel have somewhat accurately described this dish as a Hawaiian Salisbury steak, which I don't really disagree with. As you might imagine, the loco moco is popularly found all throughout Hawaiian diner cuisine, often served as a plate lunch combo with a side of mac salad and Hawaiian sun. So, today we're making a fusion of these two dishes wherein the mapo, or braised ground pork element of our mapo tofu, will serve in lieu of our gravy-covered hamburger patty for our loco moco, yielding a spicy, saucy, runny, delicious abomination that shouldn't work but absolutely does. Okay, so let's get into it. Okay, so kicking things off here first, we're starting off with some aromatic veggies to pair with our braised pork later on. This is 4 cloves of crushed and minced garlic to start, followed by 1 inch or about 1 tablespoon of fine minced ginger and the whites of 3 green onions sliced thinly. We're setting these all aside for a moment to head into the wok just before we braise our pork for their aromatic qualities. Then I'm using these reserved leafy greens of our green onions for our final finishing garnish. The Papa'aina version of this dish makes use of a slightly more fancy garnish than we usually do, which is essentially the same kind of green onion that we normally would chop, but sliced horizontally to create these long, elegant garnishes. Ooh. Next up, moving on to our pork, I've got a single pound or 16 ounces of ground pork here, which we're combining with a fairly simple marinade today, mainly comprised of tenderizers, since the bulk of our umami is going to come from our braise coming up. This is 4 tablespoons of soy sauce here to start, followed by a single tablespoon of Shaoxing wine and a half teaspoon each of white pepper and cornstarch. We're setting this aside to marinate for 15 minutes or up to 30 minutes in the fridge. Moving on to our braising sauce next. Now, for those keeping track, mapo tofu is a dish that I personally have been making for pretty much my entire life, and more importantly, I actually think that we did a pretty decent job at dialing in this braising sauce in our last attempt at it. So, for the most part, we're borrowing from our stinky mapo tofu recipe from a while back, which, after much deliberation, pretty much just focuses on creating heat and spice. So, this is 4 tablespoons of soy sauce here to start, followed by 2 tablespoons of doubanjiang chili paste, a single tablespoon of brown sugar, and a single tablespoon of chili crisp oil. For those looking, this chili oil that I'm using here is the house-made chili oil that we create at the Woo Can Cook pop-up, affectionately referred to as the good shit. We dove into a bit more detail on how to make this in the stinky mapo tofu recipe, or you could also just make use of the jarred stuff too, though I think ours is a little bit less salty and a little bit more spicy than most jarred chili oils. Over on the stove, I have my wok heating up as hot as possible, then I'm adding 4 tablespoons of peanut oil and, as always, long yao for that nice non-stick surface. Then going in here first, as promised, are my aromatic veggies. Here's my garlic, ginger, and the whites of my green onions going in for about 15 seconds until nice and fragrant, then followed by my ground pork. I'm switching to a spatula here since, as you may notice, we're gonna need to do some work to break up the clumps of our ground pork here. I found that this happens a lot more with the machine-pressed ground pork found at big box grocery stores like this one, whereas the fresh ground pork that I personally prefer will tend to be a little bit more pebbly and grainy. Not to fear though, with a little bit of spatula work, we've got a nice pebbly texture forming. Then I'm following this up with my sauce mixture plus about a half cup of water. I'm tossing this all to combine, then reducing the heat to medium-low and letting this simmer for 10 to 15 minutes, after which time we should be left with a deeply red, saucy-looking braise. Then next, I'm adding in a cornstarch slurry here comprised of 2 tablespoons of cornstarch dissolved in water, then letting this all reduce until a thickened sauce begins to form, like so. Finally, I'm removing this all from my wok, rinsing it out, and reheating over medium-low heat this time so that we may dry toast some spices. This is about a tablespoon of Szechuan peppercorn that I'm toasting with constant agitation to keep them from burning. Once these are nice and fragrant, I'm removing my peppercorn to a mortar and pestle so that we may crush these into a fine powder. Szechuan peppercorn does have a lot of little flowers on them. These are fine to eat if you're feeling lazy, but personally I like to pass this stuff through a fine mesh sieve to catch the flowers because otherwise I find that they will tend to get caught in my teeth a lot. I'm briefly plating up my mapo over rice here before heading back over to the stove. You will see why we're doing this ahead of time in a moment, so that we may fry up the final piece of our fusion masterpiece here, which is our wok fried egg. Now, I am well aware that the Papaiana version of this dish features a poached egg, not a fried egg, but I'm just always a sucker for a high heat wok fried egg whenever possible, so I'm going a little bit off book today. I have my wok heating up here at high heat once again, then I'm adding in another 2 tablespoons of peanut oil and giving one more long yao before adding in our egg directly into the center of the wok. This is where the oil will be pulling up in our round bottom woks, which make it ideal for shallow frying. I'm spooning a little bit of oil over the top of the egg just to help the whites set, yielding this beautifully lacy, crispy, and runny egg for us. Ideally, as you might imagine though, you'll want somewhere for this egg to land once it's been cooked, so I definitely recommend plating up your Mapo Moco before frying your egg. I'm finishing this all off with our Szechuan peppercorn to start, followed by some black and white sesame seed, our green onions, and a spoonful of our chili oil to finish, and we're ready to eat. Okay, so I'll be honest, I was a little bit skeptical both when I first ordered this dish at Papaiana and then again a full year later when I thought to recreate it, but I can confidently say that I was very much wrong. This is awesome. If you're not eating your mapo tofu with an egg on top, you have truly missed out on one of life's greatest creations. Our braised pork is deeply rich and saucy from the braise, which is then amplified by the gooey, runny egg yolk that has been unleashed by our wok fried egg. Then to pair, I think I'm going to stand by my decision to add a fried rather than poached egg to this dish too. I think the lacy and crispy texture that it adds pairs really nicely with our ground pork for a nice variation of texture. Now, if we're gonna get into the specifics, I'm not really sure that this is very much at all like a loco moco, but really more similar to a mapo tofu stir fry served with a fried egg on top. I'm not here to get into semantics though, so I guess just call this whatever you want. Besides, isn't pretty much everything better with a fried egg on top anyway? Okay, so that's it everyone. I hope you enjoyed this and I hope you give this one a shot. For those who are new to the channel, this one is part of a larger series dedicated to Hawaiian comfort food classics, so definitely check out that series next if you haven't yet because there's a lot of these. As always, like, comment, subscribe, share, be nice interneters, and I'll see you soon. Bye.